let's start with our first learning objective. So why current solutions aren't solving your policy management problems? So I'll give a little bit of context behind that. So generalist business tools such as Word, Excel, email, intranet sites, SharePoint, I think they all definitely have a justifiable place in organizations, and they will carry on having a place in organizations for the foreseeable future. That being said, they also can present challenges for specialist functions, including compliance, risk, governance, and audit. So based on your experiences in the industry, what sort of different approaches do you see? And what are some of the challenges associated with them? Melanie, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. So I think that what's been happening across the globe from a financial institution perspective is the regulations are becoming much more product agnostic. So in the first tranche of regulations, they were specifically focused on specific products and specific business practices. And so you could have your subject matter experts in those lines of business using the desktop available tools to do what they needed to do to ensure that they were complying with what the regulators were requiring or what the regulations were stating. And now with the maturation of the regulations and the growing presence of the regulators across the globe, what's happening is we can no longer rest on the shoulders of a handful of individuals sprinkled throughout the organization. We need to amp it up and have a much broader enterprise view of what's going on and what the connections are and what the requirements are. And so as wonderful as the Microsoft suite of tools or Google suite of tools are, they just don't have the ability to digitally provide the taxonomy required to ensure that not only are we meeting the regulations that exist now, but have the capability of meeting the regulations that are coming.
I completely understand that. And so it's not just a case of regulation affecting individual silos of businesses. It's about how it looks like, how it impacts them as a whole. Adeel, what experiences have you had with different projects around challenges on this topic?
Yeah, first of all, I would concur with Melanie that the globalization that has had an effect on international regulations and how all of us need to come together to meet some of those regulations aside from all the specific country-specific ones. I'll throw, in addition to the Microsoft suite or some of the other collaboration tools, I think some of the other tools are part of the mix as well. So some of the in-house solutions that were built long time ago, some of the other older generation tools who served the purpose very well a decade ago and so forth, but they have not been modernized to meet. And the reason why I say that is there are a lot of changes that are coming in regulation, and we no longer can afford to wait a year or 2 years or even more in some circumstances to go and implement those changes. Now, there is that globalization factor, but there is an urgency as well to act quickly on some of those regulations as well. If we are relying upon the tools which are not the right fit for the job, it adds a lot of complications. So complications from timeline standpoint, complications for bringing a lot of different people in the meeting room where they're sitting and discussing the regulations, and that honestly takes way too long. And then back and forth via email. So having a lack of solution where they can objectively discuss, objectively track the regulations, objectively figure out what needs to happen to meet some of those regulations, that seems to be lacking. And that's where the function of the overall, the RegTech or the FinTechs that is coming into the picture is to overcome some of those challenges that are currently seen with the current suite of technologies.
So Koen, why can't we just throw humans at the problem? More and more legal subject matter expertise. They'll get the job done, no?
Well, the answer is yes, but it will come for a price. And I guess that's part of the equation as well, because you want compliance to be an efficient part of your organization too. And I think that's where an interesting thing has happened. Yes, globalization, I totally get it, because nowadays many laws and regulations seem to share the same spirit, but if once the spirit is out of the bottle, then it suddenly is slightly different. So you still need to anticipate. And that's just a little bit difficult if you have a one-directional tool like Excel, because that just is just what you input, it's in there. So you're desperately waiting or hoping for tools that bring much more collaborative tooling in that, or even do interpretation of laws and regulations. So there's a lot of technology that can come in there, but yeah, I think definitely that the time is there to change, partially due to that globalization, and also because yeah, it's just the time is there. It's the moment to do it.
Yeah, I mean, at Clausematch, we recognise sort of the current way of doing things and the potential for a future way of doing things. And we describe the current way of doing things as static and siloed. So, you know, everything is being managed individually and the information is hard to interact with. The future state is collaborative and dynamic. You know, how can that information actually be dynamically related to one another, and how can you actually manage it in a way which multiple stakeholders in a complex workflow can interact with all of that information? So
maybe Freddie, I just want to add something, just very short and brief, because I also think that, well, globalization is one point, but at the same time, let's be honest, when we had the crisis in 2008, it was a very hard job for compliance to cope with business. So we should also really throw a lot of flowers to the compliance people, because they saved the industry. They just made it happen. And they were really busy solving the problem. And now we are so many years later, and they didn't have the time to reflect. And that's something that I see very often in the industry, is that people that were in compliance, that have been really working hard, but they did not see, like some of the others did, like the innovation people, they did not really see what innovation has already brought to the industry. So there is an opportunity also for compliance people just to open the door and really look what's out there, because a lot of things have changed over the last 10, 15 years.